Hola, mi amigos. Bienvenida a Mystara. We're talking about orcs, and while this seems like a rather relevant topic because of reasons today, this has actually been on the list for a while, and by sheer coincidence, turned up at just the right time. It's not the first occurrence where I was planning on talking about something that got popular right as I was getting ready to make the video. I'll take it. So what are the piggy boys like in the best setting in D&D? I bet you're expecting an angry rant over the latest D&D art. But instead you're getting an in-depth look at the most famous type of humanoid in Mystara. I'm Mr. Welch, and it's too late to back out now unless you want a visit from the Piggertons. Despite being a significant part of Mystara, and even having their own gazetteer, orcs don't have a lot of description in their official monster write-up in the rulebooks. They look like a combination of beast and man, with a human-like body but with animalistic facial features. They're foul-tempered, prefer to live underground, and don't like other races. Just 2 short descriptive paragraphs on one of the most iconic D&D bad guys, with some additional information about how to add tougher orcs based on the number encountered. There's also no picture attached, so when they say animal features, they could have otter heads for all we know, which would be a horrific mix of terrifying and adorable. That means we're going to have to hunt them down in their lairs to see what makes them tick, and there's a lot of different orc lairs in Mystara. What little art we have for our orcs show them with green skins, porcine features, and lots of muscles. The most relevant illustration is Caldwell's cover of Orcs of Thar, where the titular Orc King is doing his best Conan impersonation. Other drawings of orcs also showcase the pig-like features, though none are in color, so we just have to assume the skin is tinted green, but there are notable exceptions to this. The pig features also vary in intensity, especially with the extended jaw. Some of the orcs have it, some don't, and often the variation is shown in the same bit of art. The 3 largest orc tribes of the known world are found in the Broken Lands, Northern Reaches, and Alfheim, in addition to other tribes found in the Hollow World, Savage Coast, and their ocean-going cousins, the Karakara. There are specifically 3 breeds of orc, which somehow have scientific names. The common orc has 3 variants. The Orcus porcus is green skin and a pig face. The northern orc still keeps the pig face, but tends to be gray or white in complexion. The Imperator rex is the 2nd largest breed of orc and has more human features than a common orc. It could pass as a human if it wore enough clothes. But then we get into the orcs that cause us problems, the orcs that copy other cultures. It's a significant point for most of the orc tribes, even if they don't come out and say it. They mimic cultures that they respect in terms of strength. The Red Orcs might hate the Horse Clan with every fiber of their being, but they will try and steal their mojo by copying their culture, and more importantly, their fighting style. Since the orcs copying other cultures is one of the major problems people have with Mystara, it's time to address it. By addressing it, we're doubling down on it. Since the Beastmen were initially created by the immortal Idris by reincarnating the souls of the most evil people, they were tasked with driving out the humans and demi-humans with rewards and riches promised if they did it. As the Beastmen evolved into the different humanoid types, they developed their own individual customs. Kobolds became scavengers with an interest in mechanical devices. Hobgoblins became the most militaristic of the Beastmen races. Bugbears started to prefer stealth and treachery. Goblins just went completely debased. Orcs started copying the cultures that defeated them, or at least put up the best fights. They believed that they were the superior race, and if they could take the fighting styles of their enemies, that would make them better. The catch was they started copying their culture as well. The different orc types started to resemble the nearby human or demi-human cultures they fought against. The Hyborian orcs in the Northern Reaches, aka the Brown Orcs, dressed like the humans in that region, donning the furs that gave them their name, preferring to use axes and conducting raids like the humans they have warred against for centuries. The only thing that would set them apart from the Vestlandic or Solderfjordur troops in full gear is their larger size and that orcish weapons tend to be cruder. They like to raid and steal rather than set up forges and tanneries. Yellow orcs are the traditional enemy of the Ethengar people, with their 2 varieties being the Facius ratus or the Canis orientalis. Their animal features tend to resemble rats, or their snouts are flat against their face, so they have a resemblance to Pekingese dogs. Only 7-foot tall, incredibly muscular, tusked Pekingese dogs, which are actually quite horrifying when you think about it. That veers right away from real-world analogy right into nightmare fuel. They are the smallest of the orc race, which isn't saying much because they're still at least average human size, most reaching nearly 6 foot tall and a few approaching 7 foot tall. A short orc is often eye to eye with a tall human. They got their moniker from the yellow sand that coats just about everything they own, with their territory entirely within a sandy desert. They are almost wholly mounted in their attacks, using horses, direwolves, and similar creatures that can bear their weight. They are one of the few non-human races that can contract lycanthropy and have a well-deserved reputation for utter barbarity. They have a hatred of hobgoblins, but will trade with other humanoids. Their preferred target, of course, is the Ethengarians. The Red Orcs copy the style of the Etrugans, specifically the Horse Clan, their ancient enemy. There are two types of red orcs, the vulgaris and the terribilis. The first tends to have simian features, much like the baboon. They have little hair or are often bald. The terribilis orcs have a large amount of hair and tend to be their species' largest and most aggressive. On average, they both tend to be the largest of the orcs, though they don't reach the more extreme heights that the other orcs occasionally obtain. They earned their name from their habit of coating themselves in the red clay common to the region, believing it makes them fiercer in battle. They actually have their own tribal names, but humans call them red, brown, yellow, black, because it's the color they most associate with what they wear. Lazy Thaetian cartographers are a major point of Mystara, so we're just going to extend that a little bit further. Red orcs are fond of torture, only respect strength, and seek revenge after being conquered by goblins decades ago. Their favorite pastime is to stake a goblin out over an anthill, douse him with honey, and watch him suffer. The Black Orcs, or Imperial Orcs, are the most numerous and dangerous tribe found in the Broken Lands. These are the orcs led by King Thar himself. Their name comes from their choice of clothing rather than skin tone. While some of the orcs do have dark skin, just as many have pale skin, but most are green or have a copper appearance. These orcs follow Thar's mimicry of the Clantrian armies, specifically those led by Prince Yager. They dress like the prince's forces in dark clothes and are much more organized and disciplined than their cousins. Many are from Imperator Rex stock, with more human features than pig-like, but not enough to pass without heavy clothing, like I previously stated. They pride themselves on their skill, but fight in ranks because Thar demands it. Anyone who disagrees is welcome to bring it up with him. So far, none of his detractors have survived the resulting planning session, so the orcs follow the orders of their rather large king. Common orcs are the ones who haven't adopted a culture yet, and are considered the weakest of all the various tribes. These orcs resemble pig-faced humanoids and are often overweight and armed with the crudest of weapons. Even the other orcs look down upon the common orcs, which are frequently bullied and enslaved because of their disorganized status. They take the concept that might makes right to the highest degree. If somebody defeats their chief, then they're the new chief. After a close fight with a challenger, most orcs decide that that's the best time to challenge the king to another duel. This means they rarely have stable leadership and don't bother teaching anything except for how to swing a weapon. These orcs plague other lands, and while their disorganized attacks are easier to defend against, they're also challenging to wipe out because they will scatter and the survivors merge with the other orc tribes. They wage war against the humans because their immortals demand it, and the spells they are granted are all the proof they need that this is a holy mandate. Their goal is a sacred one. Then we get to the orcs that are more outliers than their standard versions. First up being the Alfheim orcs, which were originally part of an attack that went badly for them decades ago. Or centuries. There's a continuity problem regarding the timeline, but decades makes much more sense. The elves took a large number of orcish prisoners after the war, keeping them as slaves to repair the damage that they caused. Over the years, the elves realized they didn't want to own slaves, even if they were orcs, and released them all from service. Only many of the orcs had adopted the elven way of life and didn't want to go. They dressed like elves, they spoke elvish, and while they were as graceful as NASCAR drivers on a bender, they'd assimilated as best they could. The elves agreed to give them their own section in Alfheim Town, where the orcs still live. They aren't good in alignment, and good orcs are maybe 1 in 1,000 at best, but they're not evil. The best you can hope for an orc is to be a solid neutral alignment. The elves might treat them as second-class citizens, but they don't tolerate anyone else giving them a hard time. They might be orcs, but they are Alfheim's orcs. Then you have the Kara Kara, which everybody knows from the infamous art on the Drums of Fire Mountain module. These were Samoan-style orcs that critics throw in our face when we talk about how much we like the real-world analogies of Mystara. So we changed the art to something more primitive so they can stop complaining. These are cousins of the orc. Their language is a form of Orcish and can be understood if you speak the related language. They are the long-hated enemies of the Irendi, who have fought over numerous islands in the past, and both of them show no sign of relenting. They lack metal weapons, preferring to steal and raid coastal towns, but will avoid more technologically advanced cultures. They possess a special kind of magical music that they chant in battle, giving their warriors several benefits. They aren't much of a threat for more settled areas, but for the remote locations like the Isle of Dread, their war chants are an excellent way to get people running for the hills. Next we head to the Hollow World for the return of the Krugel Orcs! Just look at those happy Vatos living in the moment, teaching their kids how to survive in the cruelest deserts of the Hollow World. Soon, those very kids will be raiding all of their neighbors, stealing their food, enslaving their population, and threatening anyone who doesn't bend to their will with violence. Happy times. Yes, the Krugel Orcs have a Mexican vibe. Unfortunately, it tends to be the Mexican bandito vibe. Don't ask to see their badges. They were initially from the Broken Lands over 1,000 years ago, having picked up the military tactics of fast cavalry from a nearby human land. We'll use the Ispans, because there's nothing else in that area that makes sense. They attacked the dwarves of Rockholm and were utterly crushed. That does make the Ispans make more sense, as they are far closer to Rockholm than the Broken Lands are. Then that causes even more problems, so let's just not ponder too much on where the Krugel Orcs came from on the surface. These Orcs live on the edges of a sandy desert, where they reside in adobe villages, tending to their horses. When they need something, they just raid one of their neighbors. They hate the Kogalor dwarves and the Northmen that border them, but they will take bribes from the Azkans and Schottenalfen to serve as mercenaries. This isn't out of loyalty. They will happily turn on them if the opportunity presents itself. They have no friends, but they don't care. They're raiders. They take what they want, when they want. And now the Krugel Orcs are canon in 5th edition! Because when I pointed out that the controversial Mexican orc art looked like the Krugel Orcs on Twitter, the official source said that's precisely what they were. They were bringing back a canon group of orcs from the old times to celebrate the 50th anniversary. That's their story and they're sticking to it. Now if I was a betting man, I wouldn't put money on them even knowing what setting had the Hollow World before I mentioned it. But if they're going to claim Mystara, I'm going to make them stick with it. Because telling us our setting is problematic one day, and then doing exactly what they accused us of the next, smacks of hypocrisy, and they can choke on it as long as I get Mystara. I'm loyal to the setting, not the edition. I'm good with what helps the setting, even if the people presenting it have to lie to my face to do it. Anyways, next week is a lovely biographical video talking about the Golden Khan of Ethengar, Mogul Khmer. His life, his friends, and oh my god, his enormous family. And probably lots and lots of pictures of The Who, because I love that band. Until then, that's all, folks.